His penthouse was always cold. Not the kind of cold that came from broken heating or open windows. The kind that came from a man who had decided, 15 years ago, that warmth was a luxury he could not afford. Cho Hyun-woo stood at the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Seoul at midnight, his city glittering 40 floors below him like a galaxy that belonged entirely to him, and felt nothing. That was his secret. Not the empire. Not the blood on his hands. Not the bodies he'd ordered buried in the mountains outside the city. His secret was this: he felt nothing. Not when women threw themselves at him, and they did, constantly, beautifully, desperately. Not when his men cheered victories that cost them everything. Not when the doctor in Geneva had sat across from him 3 years ago and said, "Very carefully, Mr. Cho, there is nothing physically wrong with you." Psychogenic, the specialist in Tokyo had called it, a year later. A punishment, Hyun-woo called it, privately, in the dark. 15 years of nothing. 15 years of cold. He pressed his forehead against the glass and watched Seoul breathe below him, and for the first time in a long time, he wondered if this was all there was. He didn't know that the answer was already in his building. He didn't know she was running a fever of 39.4 degrees. And he didn't know that in 4 hours, everything was going to change. Welcome to Afro-Korean Romance Stories. If you are new here, first of all, where have you been? Hit that subscribe button right now and join this family. Because we don't do safe choices here. We don't do predictable love. We do the kind of stories that keep you up until 3 a.m. with your phone in your face, forgetting you have work tomorrow. If you're ready for a Mafia king who hasn't felt warmth in 15 years, a Senegalese woman who's been carrying the weight of the world since she was 19, and a love story that starts with a fever and ends with a fire, drop a like right now and let's go. This is Temperature. And I promise you, by the time we're done, you'll never look at a cold man the same way again. Nadia Diallo had been running on empty for so long she'd forgotten what full felt like. She stood in the staff locker room of the Cho Grand Hotel, Seoul's most expensive and most feared luxury property, at 5:45 in the morning, and pressed her forehead against the cool metal of her locker. Her whole body ached. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed gravel. Her skin was hot, too hot, and she knew she had a fever. She also knew she could not afford to go home. 14 months ago, her husband Son had died owing money to a man named Mr. Park. Not a loan shark in the dramatic sense. Worse, quiet man, patient man. A man who kept meticulous records and added interest daily and sent very calm, very polite men to stand outside her door every Friday morning. Son had borrowed 80 million won. He had borrowed it before Nadia understood what it was for, before she knew about the gambling, before she understood that the husband she'd followed from Dakar to Seoul, the man she'd loved since she was 21, had a secret life she'd been completely blind to. He was dead now. The debt was not. Nadia had inherited 80 million won worth of someone else's mistakes and a cleaning job at the most expensive hotel in Seoul. And every morning she got up and put on her uniform and came to work, because the alternative was unthinkable. She had a daughter back home in Dakar, 7 years old, living with Nadia's mother, waiting. "Mama, when are you coming home?" "Soon, my love, soon." Nadia straightened up, smoothed her uniform, and ignored the way the fluorescent lights seemed to flicker. She ignored the way her hands shook slightly as she tied her hair back. She ignored the heat spreading across her skin like a second layer. She had floors to clean. The Cho Grand Hotel had 42 floors. The first 38 were for guests. Floors 39 through 41 were executive suites, reserved for clients so powerful their names never appeared in booking records. Floor 42 was the penthouse. The penthouse belonged to Cho Hyun-woo. Every cleaner on staff knew 2 things about the penthouse. 1, it was the easiest floor to clean because its occupant was almost never there. 2, under no circumstances did you linger. Get in, clean, get out. Those were the instructions Mrs. Song gave every new cleaner, with the particular intensity of a woman who had seen what happened when those instructions were ignored. Nadia had been cleaning the penthouse for 3 months without incident. Tonight, she was assigned the penthouse last, which meant by the time she rode the private elevator up with her cart at 11 p.m., she had already cleaned 14 rooms, 2 conference halls, and the executive lounge. Her body was operating on something beyond exhaustion, something closer to sheer stubbornness. The penthouse was dark when she entered. She hit the lights, the soft ambient setting, and began her work. Living room, kitchen, guest bathroom, library. The office she always lingered over just a moment too long because of the vinyl records stacked floor to ceiling and the comedy DVDs that seemed so deeply at odds with everything she'd heard about Cho Hyun-woo. The cold chairman, the staff called him. Not to his face. Never to his face. She'd seen him once, from a distance, at the end of a hallway. Tall. Still. A face so composed it looked sculpted rather than grown. The kind of man who walked into rooms and made them quiet without trying. She had crossed to the other side of the hallway automatically and pretended to clean a baseboard until he passed. That was 3 months ago. She hadn't seen him since. Tonight, she was sure he wasn't here. His black car hadn't been in the basement garage. The kitchen was pristine and used. The penthouse had the particular silence of an unlived-in space. She cleaned quickly, efficiently. Her hands worked from muscle memory because her brain was increasingly offline. The fever was getting worse. She could feel it, a tide rising inside her, making her skin feel too tight and her vision swim at the edges. Just finish. Just get through. You can rest on the train. She reached the master bedroom last. She stripped the bed. He never slept here, but the sheets were changed weekly regardless, and remade it with fresh linen. The silk was the color of charcoal, cool against her burning hands. She smoothed the pillowcases, tucked the corners. She should have stopped there. She should have collected her cart and gone. But the room tilted suddenly and she grabbed the edge of the bed to steady herself and then, without entirely deciding to, she sat down. The mattress received her like an argument she'd already lost. 5 minutes, she told herself. Just 5 minutes to stop spinning. She laid back just to the edge, her feet still on the floor, her eyes open. They closed. She was asleep in 30 seconds. Cho Hyun-woo returned to his penthouse at 12:47 a.m. The board meeting had run long, fueled by the kind of paranoia that ran through the syndicate like groundwater. Constant, invisible, capable of flooding everything without warning. His business partner, Lee Dong-wook, had spent 40 minutes presenting threat assessments that Hyun-woo had already read, analyzed, and dismissed. He'd sat through it with his hands folded and his face empty and his mind 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room, as usual. He was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixed. The kind that had settled into his bones years ago and made its home there. He rode the elevator in silence. His reflection in the mirrored doors looked back at him, composed, precise, the image of control. He let himself into the penthouse. Something was different. He stood in the hallway and catalogued it without thinking. The ambient lights were on, they shouldn't be at this hour. The cart. There was a cleaning cart still positioned near the library door. He crossed the living room, the library, the office. He stopped at the master bedroom door, pushed it open. She was on his bed. A woman. In his bed. A hotel uniform. Her feet still touching the floor. One arm thrown across her eyes. Her chest rising and falling in the deep rhythm of real, bone-deep sleep. His blood went cold. Then something complicated happened inside him. He crossed the room in 3 strides, reached for her shoulder to wake her, to demand an explanation, to have her removed, and then his hand stopped an inch from her skin. He felt it from there. The heat. She was burning. He pulled his hand back and looked at her properly for the first time. Her face was flushed, her lips slightly parted, her forehead damp. Even in sleep she looked exhausted, dark circles carved deep beneath her eyes. Her fingers curled loosely like someone who'd been holding on too tight for too long and only just let go. She was sick. She was deeply, genuinely sick, and she had still come to work and cleaned his home. And now her body had overruled her mind and taken the sleep it needed regardless of where she was. Hyun-woo stood over her. He should call security. He should have her removed. He should be furious. And he was, distantly, he was, but underneath the fury was something else. Something he hadn't felt in so long he didn't have a name for it anymore. He stood there for a very long time. His hand reached out again, slowly, and pressed lightly against her forehead. The heat hit him like a wall. Something moved in his chest, cracked almost, a hairline fracture in something that had been frozen solid for 15 years. Warmth. He jerked his hand back. He stepped away from the bed. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to her and his hands at his sides and his heart doing something unfamiliar in his chest. He stood there for 20 minutes. Then he went to the kitchen and filled a glass of water. He went back to the bedroom. He sat in the chair across from the bed. And he watched her breathe. Okay, I need you to stop right here. Did Cho Hyun-woo, the cold chairman, the most feared man in Seoul, just sit in the dark watching a sick woman sleep instead of throwing her out? Yes. Yes, he did. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what is happening to this man? Because something cracked in that chest, and I think we all felt it. Hit that like button if you're already invested, and if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? This family does not play when it comes to forbidden romance. Subscribe now. The morning after, Nadia woke to light. Soft, amber, morning light coming through curtains she didn't own. In a room that was not hers. On a bed that cost more than everything she'd shipped from Dakar. She sat up so fast the room spun. Where what? The hotel. The penthouse. She'd fallen asleep. She'd fallen asleep in Cho Hyun-woo's bed. Her eyes went to the chair across the room. He was in it. Asleep. The chairman of the Cho Syndicate, Seoul's most feared man, was asleep in the chair across from his own bed. His head tilted slightly, one long leg crossed over the other. His jacket folded neatly on the armrest beside him. He had watched over her. The thought arrived before she could stop it, and it knocked the breath from her. Nadia stood up as quietly as she could, her knees unsteady. The fever was still there but lower, muted, the body's crisis slightly past its peak. She reached for her cart, began easing it toward the door, one careful inch at a time. Stop! His voice. Low, quiet, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to carry weight. She stopped. She didn't turn around. Your name. She turned. He was awake, watching her with eyes that were dark and completely unreadable. Nadia, she said. Nadia Diallo. I'm so sorry, sir. I'll clear my things and go. This will never. How long have you been sick? The question surprised her into silence. He stood, straightened his shirt, crossed to the bedside table. There was a glass of water there. He handed it to her without ceremony. Drink. She took it because she was too confused not to. Drank. Her throat thanked her. How long? He said again, returning to the window. A few days. She set the glass down. It's nothing. I'm fine. You had a fever of at least 39 degrees last night. I'm fine, she said again, because what else was there to say? He looked at her over his shoulder. Something in his expression shifted, just barely, not quite readable. You're going to sit down. I should really. You are going to sit down, he said again very quietly. And you are going to tell me why someone with a fever that high came to work instead of going to a doctor. Nadia sat down. Not because he'd told her to, because her legs had run out of options. She didn't mean to tell him everything. She told him everything. Maybe it was the fever still fogging her defenses. Maybe it was the way he listened. Not with pity. Not with the frozen judgment she'd expected. Just with stillness. Like a man who had learned that silence could hold more than words. She told him about Son. About the debt. About Mr. Park's polite men who came every Friday. About her daughter Amara in Dakar, 7 years old, who video called every Sunday and always asked Mama, when are you coming home? And received the same answer every time. Soon, my love. Soon. She told him about the 3 jobs she'd held simultaneously when she first arrived in Seoul, before landing this one. The 14-hour days. The way her hands had cracked from the cleaning chemicals until they bled. She told him she needed 40 million one more to clear the debt. She told him that at her current rate it would take another 2 years. She told him her daughter would be 9 by the time she came home. She stopped talking. The penthouse was very quiet. Hyun-woo stood at the window with his back to her and his hands clasped behind him, looking out at Seoul. She couldn't see his face. She didn't know what to make of the silence. I apologize, she said finally. You didn't ask for any of that. I did ask. He turned. What's your daughter's name? The question cracked something in her chest. Amara. How old is she? 7. 8 in April. Something passed through his face. Brief. Gone before she could name it. Go home, he said. She blinked. I'm sorry. Go home. Rest. Come back tomorrow. A pause. Your job is not in danger. She stared at him. Why are you being kind to me? It seemed like the wrong thing to say the moment it left her mouth. He looked at her for a long moment. I'm not being kind, he said. You're a liability to this hotel if you collapse in a guest's room. I'm managing a risk. He turned back to the window. She left. In the elevator, she pressed her back against the mirrored wall and closed her eyes. Managing a risk. She almost smiled. She thought about him all the way home. She thought about him for the 2 days she rested, drinking the electrolytes she couldn't really afford from the pharmacy near her apartment, watching the soul gray sky through her small window. She thought about the way he'd sat in that chair all night, managing a risk. She thought about how hard he'd been working to pretend that was what it was. I need a comment right now. Is Cho Hyun-woo pretending he doesn't care? Or does he actually not know that he cares yet? Because I think this man has been so frozen for so long, he doesn't have the vocabulary for what's happening to him. Drop your thoughts below. Like this video if you're feeling this story. And for the ones still sitting on that subscribe button, come on. You know you're not going anywhere. Join the family. Hyun-woo had a rule about personal information. He didn't collect it. He didn't ask for it. He operated on need to know, and his personal emotional state was something no one needed to know about, including himself. So why, 3 days after the woman with the fever had left his penthouse, was he sitting across from his private physician, Dr. Yu, asking questions he'd spent 15 years not asking? Tell me again, he said, about the psychogenic diagnosis. Dr. Yu, who had known Hyun-woo since he was a boy, and was one of approximately 4 people alive who was not afraid of him, set down his coffee. You've never wanted to discuss it before. I'm discussing it now. Dr. Yu studied him. Something happened. Answer the question. The psychogenic erectile dysfunction is the body's physical response to psychological trauma. In your case, the trigger was likely Jaemin's death. Careful pause. Your body-associated intimacy, vulnerability, the act of letting someone close with catastrophic loss. It's been protecting you ever since. Hyun-woo was quiet. Jaemin, his best friend since boyhood, his second in command, the brother his parents had never given him. At 24, Hyun-woo had discovered that Jaemin had been feeding information to a rival syndicate for 18 months. Slowly, methodically, selling pieces of everything Hyun-woo had built. He had done what the chairman of the Cho syndicate was required to do. He had given the order himself because to give it to someone else would have been cowardice. And she knows I'm working. Nadia chose her words carefully. I don't want her to know how hard. She's 7. She should be worried about school, not me. That's not sustainable, he said. Not unkindly. Simply, a man stating a fact. No, she agreed. It's not. He turned from the window. He looked at her the way she imagined he looked at everything. Completely without blinking, as though he was cataloging rather than observing. Why did you stay in Seoul? He asked. After your husband died, you could have returned to Senegal. And brought the debt home with me? She almost laughed. Mr. Park's patience doesn't stop at borders. You could have run. I have a daughter. Running is a luxury for people without children. Something shifted in his face. You're not angry, he said, like it surprised him. At your husband, you talk about the debt like it's weather. Condition. Not something he did to you. Nadia was quiet for a moment. He was a flawed man, she said finally. He made terrible choices. He also taught me to cook jollof rice in a Seoul kitchen and called me beautiful every morning for 4 years and cried like a child when Amara was born. She met his eyes. People are not just their worst decisions. The silence that followed was different from the one before it. Hyun-woo looked at her like she'd said something he needed to write down. Finish your work, he said, quiet, and leave the service elevator locked. I'll have someone arrange a car. She blinked. I don't need. The subway at this hour isn't safe. He turned back to the window. Don't argue about it. She didn't argue about it. The car was a black sedan. The driver didn't speak, which suited her. She sat in the back with her hands in her lap and watched Seoul pass outside the window and tried very hard not to feel anything. She failed. It became a pattern over the following weeks without either of them naming it as one. She cleaned the penthouse. Some nights he wasn't there. Some nights he returned while she was finishing. On those nights they talked, briefly, standing at opposite ends of the large living room like 2 people negotiating a careful distance they both pretended was comfortable. He asked questions the way other people breathed, constantly, precisely, without apparent effort. He wanted to know about Dakar, about her mother, About what Amara looked like when she laughed. About the food Nadia missed. About the Senegalese music she listened to through her earphones on the subway. She asked him nothing at first. Then one evening she gestured at the vinyl collection and said, "Who got you into records?" He stopped, like the question surprised him. "My father. Were you close?" "He died when I was 17. A pause. "We were not close enough."
I'm sorry.
He looked at the records for a moment. "He had terrible taste," he said finally. "Loved the worst possible Korean ballads from the 1980s. Absolutely no shame about it." A pause. "I kept them all." It was the most personal thing he'd said to her in 3 weeks. She noticed that his shoulders had dropped about half an inch. She didn't say anything about it. "I need you to comment right now and tell me, does Cho Hyun-woo even know he's falling? Because this man is asking about her daughter, sending cars, keeping terrible vinyl records for a father he wasn't close enough to. He is melting and he doesn't even have the language for it yet. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment. When do you think he realizes? Let's talk about it." The night everything changed. Nadia came to the penthouse with a headache behind her eyes, and her phone full of a message she didn't know how to answer. Mr. Park's men had come to her apartment that morning. Not the usual polite knock. This time they'd come inside, looked around. One of them had picked up the framed photo of Amara from the windowsill, looked at it for a long moment, and set it back down without saying anything. She understood the message. She'd been shaking since then, a low-grade tremor in her hands she kept trying to outwork. The penthouse was occupied when she arrived. Hyun-woo was in his office, door partially open, on the phone, his voice very low and very controlled in the way that meant something had gone wrong somewhere and he was handling it. She cleaned around him, quiet, efficient. When she reached the library, she sat on the floor in front of the vinyl shelves and began cataloging them the way she always did when she needed to feel useful, reading the labels, organizing by decade. She didn't hear him come in. "You're shaking," he said. She looked up. He stood in the doorway with his arms at his sides and his eyes on her hands. She pressed them flat against her thighs. "I'm fine." He crossed the room and sat down on the floor. Not on the reading chair. On the floor, directly across from her, his back against the bookshelf. He looked at her. "Tell me," he said. She told him about the morning. About Mr. Park's men. About the photo. When she finished, his jaw was tight. His eyes had gone somewhere cold and deliberate. But his voice, when he spoke, was quiet. "How much?" he said. "The remaining debt." "Exactly. 42 million won." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll have it cleared by morning." She stared at him. "What?" "The debt. I'll clear it." "You can't just." "I can." His eyes met hers. "I will. That's 42 million won." Her voice was unsteady. "That's not a small amount, even for you." "No," he looked at her steadily. "It isn't." "Then why?" Something moved behind his eyes. "Because you've been carrying someone else's debt for a year and a half while your daughter waits for you in Dakar. And because Mr. Park sending men to look at her photograph is a threat I will not allow to stand." Nadia's eyes filled. She never cried. She hadn't cried since Son's funeral, since she'd sat in a Seoul mortuary and understood the full weight of what she'd inherited, and decided that crying was something she couldn't afford right now. "Don't," she said, pressing the heels of her hands against her eyes. "Don't be kind to me. I can't. I'm not being kind." His voice was rough. "I'm being selfish." She lowered her hands, looked at him. He was looking at her the way he'd been looking at her for 3 weeks, like she was something he was trying to understand and couldn't quite, like she kept refusing to fit into any category he had available. "Selfish," she repeated. "You came to work with a 40-degree fever because you couldn't afford not to." His voice was controlled, but something underneath it wasn't. "You're shaking right now because men threatened your daughter, silently, with a photograph. And I've been watching this and calling it—" He stopped. "Calling it what?" she asked. "Nothing." He looked away. "I've been telling myself it was nothing." The room was very quiet. "Hyun-woo," she said. He looked at her when she said his name, like it surprised him, like he hadn't heard it said without chairman in front of it in a very long time. "Why does it feel cold in here all the time?" she asked. A long pause. "Because I made it that way." He looked at the window. "It's easier." The cold. A beat. Or it was. She reached out and put her hand over his. He went completely still. She felt him stop breathing. She felt the way his whole body locked. Not in rejection, in shock. The shock of someone touched in a way they had forgotten was possible. "I've been warm my whole life," she said. "Too warm," my mother always said. She said I burned from the inside. She kept her hand over his. "I don't think that's a problem when the person next to you runs cold." He looked at their hands for a long time. Then he turned his over. And he held on. She didn't know who moved first. She thought probably it was him. But she had been leaning in too, so it was both of them, simultaneously, crossing the last careful distance they'd maintained for weeks. And when his mouth found hers, it was nothing like she'd expected. Not cold. Not controlled. Desperate. Like a man breaking the surface of water after 15 years. He pulled back first. His eyes found hers. "I need to tell you something," he said. She waited. He told her about Jaemin. About the order he'd given. About the night the cold had started. He told her carefully, honestly, the way someone tells a truth they've rehearsed never telling. Halting at first, then faster, like once the door was open he couldn't close it again. He told her about the doctors. About psychogenic. About 15 years of nothing. He told her what happened in his chest when she'd sat in the dark with her fever and her honesty and her absolute refusal to pretend she was anything other than exhausted. "I felt warm," he said, quiet. "For the first time in 15 years. I felt warm." Nadia looked at him for a long time. "That terrified you," she said. "Yes. And now?" A beat. "Still yes." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "But less." She kissed him again. What happened that night she kept. It was hers. But she would say this. When she woke in the early hours of the morning, wrapped in silk sheets the color of charcoal with his warmth all along her back and his breathing slow and even behind her, she understood what safe felt like. She hadn't known before. She thought she had. She hadn't. "I'm gonna need everyone to take a breath right now." He told her the truth. The real truth. Not the sanitized version. Not the managed version. The true, painful 15 years of silence truth. And she met it with open hands. Drop a comment. Did you expect him to tell her? And are you okay? Because I'm not okay. Like, subscribe, tell a friend. This family needs to be bigger for what's coming. The morning was gold. Hyunwoo woke before she did, which was unusual since he rarely slept at all, and lay still for a long time, cataloging things. The weight of the bed. Different. The temperature. Higher. Her breathing, slow and deep, beside him. His chest felt strange. Not the absence of feeling he'd lived in for 15 years. Something more like the ache that comes when a frozen limb begins to thaw. Not quite pain, not quite pleasure. The nerve endings relearning something they'd forgotten. He made breakfast. He didn't know why. He could count on one hand the number of times he'd cooked in this kitchen. His staff handled everything. He was not a man who cooked. But he found himself in the kitchen at 6 a.m., very seriously studying the contents of his refrigerator like a general planning a campaign, and then making rice porridge because he knew she'd been sick and he vaguely remembered that juk was good for recovery, and then adding the things he'd found in a quick, silent search of his own memory, ginger, a little sesame oil. He set it on the table. He went back to the bedroom. She was gone. The sheets were smoothed on her side. Her uniform was gone. The only sign she'd been there was the slight depression in the pillow and the warmth that still lingered in the air. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he went to the table and sat down and looked at the porridge he'd made for two. His phone rang. Dongwook. "She left the building 20 minutes ago," Dongwook said. He paused. "I had someone watching the penthouse access. After the Mr. Park situation. And she took the subway. No one followed her." Another pause. "Boss, are you?" "Handle the park account," Hyunwoo said. "Full clearance. Today." Silence. "The debt is 42 million. I'm aware of the amount." Hyunwoo. Dongwook almost never used his name. "What's happening?" Hyunwoo looked at the porridge. At the bowl he'd set across from himself. At the seat no one was sitting in. "Something I should have let happen a long time ago," he said. "She came back that evening. He knew she would. Not because he'd summoned her, but because the penthouse was still her assigned floor and she was not the kind of woman who ran from things permanently. She was the kind of woman who ran, felt the full weight of what she'd left, and came back with her spine straight. She arrived at her usual time. She had her cart. She was in her uniform. She was precisely professional when she entered the living room and found him sitting on the couch with his laptop open. Waiting. "The debt is cleared," he said. She stopped. "What?" "As of this morning, Mr. Park received full payment. His men will not come to your apartment again." He paused. "I had a conversation with him about the photograph." She stood very still. "What kind of conversation?" "The kind I am good at." A silence. She put the cart down. "You didn't have to do that today. I didn't ask you to. You didn't ask me for anything." He set the laptop aside. "You've never asked me for anything. You told me the truth because I asked, and then you sat on my floor and put your hand over mine." And he stopped. His hands were resting on his knees. His voice was careful. "I made you porridge this morning." She blinked. "Porridge?" "It was still on the table when I came back from the kitchen. I didn't know you'd left." He looked at her. "It was very good porridge." Something in her face changed. Softened. "I ran," she said. "I know. I've been running since Son died. It's become habit." She crossed the room and sat in the chair across from him. "But I've also been standing in subway cars for 40 minutes every morning thinking about a man who sat in a chair all night to make sure a woman he didn't know didn't choke on her own fever." She held his gaze. So, he agreed. A pause. "I have a daughter," she said. "She is the first fact of my life. She comes before everything. I know. My world is not like yours. I can't pretend it is. I know that too." She looked at him. "Then what are you suggesting?" He was quiet for a moment. "I'm suggesting that I've been cold for 15 years and I don't want to be anymore." He looked at her steadily. "I'm suggesting that Amara should be here with her mother. I'm suggesting that when you call her on Sunday, I'd like to hear her laugh through the phone." He paused. "I'm suggesting we stop performing distance when neither of us wants it." Nadia's breath was unsteady. "That's a lot," she said. "Yes. And your world? The syndicate? The enemies? I will handle my world." His voice was quiet and absolute. "I have been handling it for 15 years. What I have failed to handle is myself." She looked at him for a long moment. "If I stay," she said carefully, "I need to be a person in your life, not a secret, not a managed liability." "Yes. And I need to be able to bring Amara here, to know she's safe. I'll arrange it personally." She was quiet. "Then why me? There are beautiful, powerful women who make me feel nothing." His eyes held hers. "You make me feel warm. Do you understand how long it's been since anything made me feel warm?" She did understand. She'd heard it in his voice when he'd told her. The 15-year accounting of absence. She stood and crossed to the couch and sat beside him, and he was already turning toward her. And when she put her hand against his face, he closed his eyes like she'd given him something back. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he repeated. "Somebody hold me." She said okay. He said okay. And the cold chairman of the Cho Syndicate, the man who hadn't felt warmth since he was 24 years old, sat there with his eyes closed and a woman's hand on his face like it was the first real thing to happen to him in 15 years. Because it was. Comment below. Team Nadia and Hyunwoo, are we here for it? Drop a fire emoji if you are. Like this video. Subscribe right now because what's coming next is going to change everything. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Sundays with Amara's voice coming through the phone, bright and curious, and Hyunwoo sitting across the room pretending to read while actually listening to the way Nadia laughed differently when she talked to her daughter. Lighter, younger, like a woman who remembered who she was before the weight of everything. 3 weeks of dinners in the penthouse, the chef preparing meals Hyunwoo chose based on what she'd mentioned missing. Thai boudin the way her mother made it, jollof rice with fried plantains, maif, dishes the kitchen staff learned quickly because the chairman had expressed preferences with the kind of quiet certainty that left no room for questions. 3 weeks of her hand finding his in the dark, of his arms around her like a man who had forgotten he was allowed to hold things. 3 weeks of warmth. Seoul noticed. Not the city. The syndicate. Boardrooms noticed. Business partners noticed. The particular sharpness Hyunwoo brought to every room, the cold precision that made him both invaluable and terrifying, had shifted by a degree that only people accustomed to watching him could detect. He smiled once. In a meeting. Not at anything funny. Just for a moment, distracted. there and gone. Dongwook told him afterward, "They noticed. Let them notice. Hyunwoo, these men will see it as weakness. These men have been afraid of me for 15 years. His voice was even. Let them discover whether that fear was about my coldness or my competence." He paused. I know which one it was. But Dongwook was not wrong about the danger. The message came on a Wednesday. It arrived through channels, anonymous, routed through 3 relays, completely untraceable. But its contents were precise enough to make Hyunwoo's blood go cold in the old way. The bad way. "We know about the Senegalese woman. We know where her daughter is. Withdraw your bid on the Northern District or we will make a point through her." Hyunwoo read it twice. He put his phone down on his desk very carefully. Then he called Dongwook. "Find out who sent this," he said. "I want a name by tonight. And the bid. The bid stands." His voice was ice. "And triple the protection on Nadia's apartment. Her mother's address in Dakar. And arrange transport for the child. I want Amara in Seoul within 48 hours. A pause. "You're bringing the daughter here? She should have been here months ago." His jaw was tight. "I should have done it weeks ago. I was being careful." A beat. "I'm done being careful." He told Nadia that evening. He told her everything. The message. The threat. His response. He watched her process it. Watched the fear move through her face and then get replaced by something steady. The same steadiness he'd seen the first night when she'd been sick and exhausted and still hadn't broken. "Amara," she said. "You're bringing her here. With your permission." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Who sent the message?" "I don't know yet. I will." She looked at him. "Are you going to hurt someone over this?" He held her gaze. "Yes." She was quiet again. Then, "Is that something I have to accept if I'm with you?" "It's something you deserve to know," he said carefully. "Not accept. No, this is my world. I cannot change what it requires." He paused. "But I can ensure that you and Amara are never in the center of it." "Can you actually ensure that?" "No one has ever come at me through someone I love," he said. "Because I have never loved anyone that could be reached." He looked at her steadily. "This is new territory for both of us." She sat with that for a long time. "Tell me when you know who it is," she said finally. "You want to know?" "You said I deserve to know." "Yes, I want to know." He nodded. The name came back by midnight. Kwon Sungo, a mid-level partner in the syndicate. A man who had been watching Hyunwoo's warmth like a man watching cracks appear in a wall he'd been planning to walk through. Hyunwoo handled it. He didn't tell Nadia the details. She didn't ask for them. But Kwon Sungo withdrew from the syndicate within 24 hours and left Seoul within 48. And no message was ever sent through those channels again. What Hyunwoo did tell her was this: "It's done." And she nodded and said, "Okay." And then, "When does Amara land?" "Friday evening," he said. "I had my pilot reroute for a direct flight." Something moved across Nadia's face. Something enormous and luminous that she couldn't quite contain. "You sent your private pilot. She's 7. And she's been waiting long enough." Nadia covered her mouth with her hand. He watched her try not to cry and fail and stood in front of her, uncertain for a moment. And then he pulled her against him and she pressed her face to his shoulder and held on, and he felt her shaking. Not with fear, not with fever, with relief. He held her as tight as he'd been taught not to hold anything and felt the warmth of her all the way through.
"I'm crying.
I said what I said."
I'm crying.
He sent his private pilot for her 7-year-old daughter because she's been waiting long enough. This man. 15 years frozen, and he thaws out and immediately sends a private jet for a child he hasn't even met. Comment below with your reaction. I need to know I'm not alone in this. Like this video, subscribe, and tell me, are you ready for Friday? Friday evening, Incheon Airport. Nadia stood at the arrival's gate with her hands clasped together so tight her knuckles ached, watching the doors. Hyunwoo stood beside her. He had offered to send the car alone, to let this be a private reunion. She had said, "Come with me." He had come. The doors opened and opened and opened, passengers streaming through, and then, Mama. A small hurricane in a yellow dress. 7 years old, gap-toothed, braids swinging, running full speed through the arrivals hall with absolutely no regard for anyone in her path. Nadia went to her knees on the airport floor and caught her and held on so tight Amara squirmed and laughed and said, "Mama, you're squishing me," in French accented English, and then switched to Wolof and then back to French, and Nadia was laughing and crying simultaneously in a way she hadn't let herself do in 18 months. Hyun-woo stood 2 steps back. He watched. After a moment, Amara looked up over her mother's shoulder and saw him. She stared at him with the frank, unfiltered assessment that belongs only to children and people who've decided they have nothing to lose. "You're very tall," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "Mama said you have a very big house." He glanced at Nadia, who was wiping her eyes and trying to look like she hadn't said that. "She's correct. Do you have a pool?" He considered. "I can get one." Amara appeared to find this acceptable. She disentangled from her mother, walked directly to Hyun-woo, and held up her hand. "I'm Amara," she said seriously. "Amara Diallo." He shook her hand. "Jo Hee-nu." "You can call me Amara. You can call me Hyun-woo." She considered this. "I'll call you Woo," she decided. Hyun-woo is too long. Behind her, Nadia made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "Woo," he repeated. "Yes." Amara looked up at him. "Are you my mama's friend?" A pause. "Yes." "Her good friend?" "Yes." "Okay." She appeared satisfied. She took his hand and Nadia's hand simultaneously, linking the 3 of them. "Let's go. I want to see the big house." Hyun-woo looked down at the small hand in his. He felt the warmth of it travel all the way up his arm and into his chest. He thought of Jae-min, of the night 15 years ago, of the choice that had frozen him. He thought of Dr. Yu's words. "It requires your body to believe that trust is safe again. That warmth won't destroy you." He looked at Nadia, who was looking at him over their daughter's head with soft eyes. He held the small hand carefully, like something precious. He didn't let go. The weeks that followed were the strangest of his life. He had run a criminal empire since he was 17 years old. He had negotiated with men who would kill you before breakfast and smile over lunch. He had made decisions that moved money, power, and occasionally people across continents. Nothing had prepared him for Amara. She was everywhere. She had opinions about every room in the penthouse. She reorganized his vinyl collection by color before anyone could stop her, and then explained with complete confidence that this was better. She demanded that breakfast happen at the table, together, because that was what her grandmother did, and somehow this became a rule that Hyenwa's entire kitchen staff adjusted their schedules around. She called him Woo with absolute authority. She made him watch animated films on his 85-inch television with the kind of commentary that suggested she believed herself to be a critic. She fell asleep in the middle of one and he sat there in the dark for 20 minutes, watching the credits roll, with her asleep against his arm and Nadia asleep against his shoulder, and he felt the impossible, unfamiliar weight of it. This is what warmth is, he thought. This is what I gave up. Not just the physical, the whole architecture of it. The small hands, the laughter, the way Nadia sang under her breath in the kitchen in Wolof when she didn't know he could hear. The arguments about nothing. The ordinary, radical intimacy of existing in shared space with people who expected nothing from you except your presence. His mother called 3 times. He didn't answer. She came to the penthouse on a Thursday. Madame Cho was 61, elegant. The kind of woman whose softness had been refined out of her over decades until what remained was pure structure. She had run the social side of the Cho Empire for 30 years, and she did not believe in softness as a strategy. She sat across from Hyun-woo in the living room with her hands folded and said, "This woman, the cleaner. Her name is Nadia." His voice was even. "This is going to destabilize everything you've built. Your partners are already asking questions. You're standing. My standing is fine." He looked at his mother. "It has been fine for 15 years because I built something worth standing on. That doesn't change. A foreign woman. A child that isn't yours. Hyun-woo, think about what this. She has a name," he said again, quiet. "And the child's name is Amara. They are not a situation I'm managing. They are my family." His mother's composure cracked, just slightly. "You've known her for 3 months. I have known myself for 39 years. His voice was steady. "I know what I felt like before her and I know what I feel like now. The difference is not ambiguous." He held his mother's gaze. "I need you to hear me. I will not choose the coldness again. Not for the syndicate, not for appearance, not for you. I would rather be warm and vulnerable and present than spend another 15 years being perfectly controlled and completely empty. A long silence. His mother looked at her hands. She makes you happy, she said finally. Yes. And the child. Something moved in his face. Amara called me Wu on the first day. She reorganized my vinyl collection and told me it was better this way. A pause. She was right. It is better. His mother was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll need to meet her properly. Careful pause. Both of them. Hyun-woo allowed himself to breathe. Can we appreciate for a moment? He defended them by name. Her name is Nadia. The child's name is Amara. Not the situation. Not the woman. Names. To his mother. In his mother's presence. That is a man who has decided. Comment below. Are you proud of him? Because I am. I genuinely am. Like this video. Subscribe to this channel. And stay with me because we are almost at the end and the end is going to wreck you in the best possible way. 6 months after Nadia Diallo fell asleep in Cho Hyunwoo's bed, she woke in it on a Sunday morning to the sound of Amara's laughter coming from the kitchen. She lay still for a moment, listening. Amara was narrating something. A complicated story involving the animated characters from last night's film, several imaginary kingdoms, and a central conflict she had apparently been developing in her head since 6 a.m. The narration was primarily in Wolof with French interjections and occasional Korean phrases she'd picked up from the kitchen staff, delivered to an audience that responded in the quiet, steady way of a man who had no idea how to talk to children and had simply decided to listen instead. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what children needed. Woo, are you listening? Yes. Are you sure? Because you have the face you make when you're thinking about work.
I'm listening.
The general of the Northern Kingdom has underestimated the princess. Yes, exactly. That's what I said. Nadia smiled at the ceiling. She got up. She walked to the kitchen. Hyun-woo was at the counter with his coffee and his phone and his very serious face. And Amara was at the kitchen island with a bowl of cereal, gesturing expansively. When she saw her mother, she lit up and waved. Mama. Woo understood the plot. He's very smart, Nadia said. That's what I said. Amara returned to her cereal with the satisfied air of someone whose point has been made. Hyun-woo looked at Nadia over his coffee. His expression was the same as always, composed, still careful. But she knew it now, knew the warmth underneath it that didn't broadcast itself, that had to be earned by learning what to look for. The slight softening around his eyes, the way his hands had unclenched. She came to stand beside him and he moved automatically to make room. The small physics of two people who had begun to orbit each other without negotiating it. Sunday call, she said quietly. He nodded. I cleared the morning. He always cleared Sunday mornings now. She hadn't asked him to. He'd simply stopped scheduling anything, quietly, without announcement. She took his coffee and drank from it, and he let her, and Amara narrated her kingdoms, and the Seoul morning pressed gold against the windows of the penthouse that used to be cold. Later, after the call with her mother in Dakar, after Amara had fallen asleep in the afternoon sun streaming across the reading room floor with a book open on her chest, Nadia found Hyun-woo in the library. He was sitting on the floor again. Their floor, she'd started thinking of it. The place where everything had broken open. She sat beside him. Your mother called me this week, she said. He looked at her. I know. I told her she could. She wants to have dinner. I know that too. Nadia was quiet for a moment. She's not what I expected. She is exactly what I expected, he said. She's doing the best she knows how with tools that were given to her in a different time. A pause. It doesn't excuse everything. But I'm done requiring perfection from people. She looked at him. You've changed, she said. Yes. Does it feel like loss? The coldness? Do you miss it? He considered the question seriously, the way he considered everything. I miss the certainty of it, he said finally. Cold is simple. Nothing can hurt you because nothing reaches you. He looked at his hands. Warm is complicated. Everything is possible, which means everything can go wrong. And I'll take it. His voice was quiet. I'll take every complication. He looked at her. I'd rather spend 1 warm year than 50 cold ones. She put her head on his shoulder. He put his arm around her. You know what I've been thinking? She said. Tell me. That night, when I fell asleep in your bed. She paused. I was so ashamed. I kept telling myself it was the fever, that I'd never been so unprofessional, that I'd get fired and then what? She stopped. I didn't know I was about to find something. Neither did I. His arm tightened around her. I thought I was going to walk in and find a trespasser, and instead I found a liability, she said, half smiling. The opposite, he said. I found the opposite of a liability. I found the thing that made the accounting balance. Finally, after 15 years of nothing adding up. He pressed his mouth to her hair. I found something worth being warm for. She closed her eyes. Soul hummed below them. Amara slept in the reading room. The vinyl records stood in their new color-coded order on the shelves. The chair that had watched over her through a fever sat in the corner of the bedroom. The penthouse was warm. Not the temperature. Something deeper. Something structural. The kind of warmth that comes from a man who chose to thaw. And the woman who made him believe that warmth was survivable. A year later, Amara's 8th birthday was held in the penthouse with fairy lights strung from every ceiling and jollof rice and thigh boudin and a cake from the French patisserie that she had picked out herself, decorated with tiny fondant crowns because she was, in her own estimation, a queen. Nadia's mother flew in from Dakar for the first time. She was a small woman with Nadia's eyes and Amara's certainty and the particular authority of a grandmother who has kept a family together through difficult years. She walked into the penthouse, looked around, looked at Hyun-woo, and said something in Wolof that made Nadia press her lips together very tightly. What did she say? He asked later. She said you have sad eyes but warm hands, and that's the best combination a man can have. He was quiet for a moment. She's right, he said. About the sad part. The warm part too, Nadia said. It's getting warmer. He looked at her. I want to talk to you about something, he said.
I'm listening.
Amara needs a school. Permanent one. Not a temporary enrollment. He looked at his hands. She should be able to tell people where she goes to school. Where she lives. A beat. I've been thinking about what permanent looks like. Nadia was very still. Hyun-woo. I'm not asking you to decide anything today. His voice was careful. I'm asking you to consider it. I'm asking you to know that when I use the word permanent, I mean it in the largest sense. She looked at him for a long time. You are the most terrifying man I have ever met, she said. I know. And somehow also the safest place I've ever been. I know that too. He held her gaze. I spent 15 years being the kind of cold that nothing could touch. And then a sick woman fell asleep in my bed and ruined everything. A pause. I'm grateful every day. She crossed the room and held his face in her hands. He closed his eyes. Yes, she said. To permanent. He exhaled. The warmth he'd been carrying in his chest for a year expanded, filled the edges, reached the places that had been frozen longest. In the other room, Amara shrieked with laughter over something her grandmother said. The birthday candles burned. And in the penthouse that used to be cold, something that had started with a fever and a man sitting in a chair in the dark, watching over a stranger, became the thing it had always been moving toward. Home. And that's temperature. I need everyone in the comments right now. Are you okay? Because I am not okay. This story took everything out of me and I gave it everything. Amara calling him Woo. Him clearing Sundays. The birthday party.
Permanent.
I can't. If this story moved you, and I think it did, here is what I need from you. Like this video. Right now. Do it. Subscribe to this channel. If you're not part of this family yet, you just spent an hour with us. You're already family. Hit that button. Comment below and tell me your favorite moment. Mine is the airport. I'll call you Woo. Hyun-woo is too long. I will never recover from that child. And share this with someone who needs a love story right now. Someone who is cold. Someone who has forgotten what warmth feels like. Because that's what these stories are for. Cho Hyun-woo sat in a chair all night for a woman he didn't know because something in him recognized something in her. Nadia Diallo crossed the world for her daughter and fell asleep in the wrong bed and changed a man's life. Sometimes the most important thing you'll ever do is the accident you couldn't have planned. This is Afro-Korean romance stories. We don't do safe choices here. We do the real ones. Until next time, stay warm.